Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now this week we are going to be continuing our look at international national results. There have been 6 more, which I believe is the same amount as we went through last week, so we are doubling our pool of data from which to draw our conclusions, and there are some interesting things going on, including me being a little bit right. So, before we get to that, there is a little bit of news, so let's get rolling. First things first, the most exciting bit of news, PTCG Radio is back on YouTube. It had been about 9 months since I last posted a YouTube video. I say had been because it is no longer 9 months. It is about 3 or 4 days since I posted a new YouTube video. I popped a little video up there of my Pyro Raichu deck playing against a Plasma deck, and it is up there with full commentary, which I think is of a pretty high standard, but as with everything I do, I welcome feedback and commentary, so do tweet me at the Wassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or to be honest, if you're watching a YouTube video, you might as well just stick a comment down there on the YouTube comments. I'm going to try and get this episode up onto YouTube, and if I've been successful and this episode is on YouTube, and you're listening on YouTube, hello Bill, nice to see you. I really hope there's someone called Bill listening, because that would have been freaky as anything. But I'm going to try and get a bit more on YouTube now. Work is winding down a teensy bit, so hopefully I've worked through my emails. I've replied to a bunch of emails that were long overdue. My apologies to those people, like Victor Rodriguez, who had to wait a little bit longer than they should have had to have done for a reply. But now I have got a little bit more time, so do get onto my YouTube channel. There is a video up there, and I will be putting more up there, hopefully starting soon. Now, initially, the decks I plan on playing on there are Pyro Charizard. Not Pyro Charizard, sorry. I don't like that deck at all. I tried it, I just couldn't get working with it. Pyro Raichu and TDK, Thunderous Deoxys Kyurem. I am also going to be aiming to get some Aromatisse, just full-on fairy decks up there. And in the near future, I'm looking to try and add in a little bit of Toxicroak Dragalge action. And maybe even a Miltank deck or two. But, as always, as I've said, I welcome, feedback, ideas, etc. So, my recommendation, tweet me, email me, etc. Tell me what decks you would like me to see playing on there. Now, I can't make any guarantees because I've only got a limited pool of cards, and as I haven't bought many cards lately, I need to spend a bit of time building up my my collection on PTCGO, but I've got a bunch of stuff on there, so hit me up, I'll see what I can do in terms of decks. But please, get yourself over to PTCG Radio on YouTube. Literally, go onto YouTube and search PTCG Radio. I don't know if it works with a space, but it definitely works without a space. You'll find me nice and easily, and just go on and have a look. I'm hoping to get maybe 1 or 2 videos up a week. I don't know if I can do more than that. However, over the summer, you might even be seeing a daily video. That's my goal over summer. We'll see if it works. But for the time being, there's stuff going up. Go and check it. I promise you, it's good watching. Now, the first piece of news, and this is very disappointing for me this week, is that Furious Fist will not be legal for Worlds. And we know that for an absolute fact, because Furious Fist comes out 2 days before the grinder and 3 days before the main event, or is it 1 and 2 days? I forget. Regardless, just before. And Pokémon have announced officially that new sets will now be legal for tournaments from 21 days after their street date in the US. Now, if you live in a country with a slightly delayed release date, that is irrelevant. It seems to be that they will, and it is, that they will be legal around the world from 21 days from their release date. Obviously, this is not the same in Japan, because we get the cards a lot later than Japan, or at least a couple of months later, and that would just be silly. But certainly for US and Europe and South America and everybody but Japan, 21 days. Which, I mean, it of course makes perfect sense. The biggest upside of this, very clearly, is it gives people a chance to get the cards. Now, I know I've mentioned this on the podcast several times, including a report at the time. Oh no, I don't think I was doing a podcast back then. But anyway, I've mentioned it before when I went to the ECC with my Regigigas Mewtwo deck and got 33rd. Because, and one of the reasons I did so well with that deck was I had 3 Mewtwo's, other people didn't. And that really was an issue at that, because it wasn't just people not having the resources, the money to get the cards, it was the time issue. People in the UK had places like Chaos Cards where they could overpay 40 quid for a Mewtwo. But in some European countries, you don't have websites like that can get it fast enough. And although you can use Troll and Toad and Professor Oak and other such websites, I shouldn't be plugging these, should I? Never mind. Who will deliver to all European countries, they can't get it. They can't physically get it there from America in time. So this does stop those problems. Now, with 21 days, that is enough time for everybody to get the cards, and it is enough time even for people in Europe to buy from American websites and give them time to send over. Of course, it makes sense, and from any logical standpoint, you can't see a problem with it. But from a purely it's not as much fun standpoint, how awesome would it be if we could have Worlds 2 days after a new set dropped? It was never going to happen, but how fun would it be? People playing brand new decks that aren't properly tested, people playing old decks assuming that new decks won't be played. I mean, that fighting deck, how much fun would it have been to see something like a Landorus Lucario deck? Think, is it actually any good? Is it tested enough? Will people be playing older decks because they don't think it will be playing? Could older decks handle it? I mean, it would have been so much fun. Of course, speaking as someone who's definitely not playing in World this year, I suppose it's far more fun for me than someone who has been testing, all year and refining their deck as each new set comes out and doesn't want to be screwed over by a last-minute release. Still, my opinion, it'll be more fun with it. Now, it's also been announced that US Nationals is going to be streamed this year. And it is going to be streamed by Pokémon on their official Twitch channel. Now, this can be nothing but a good thing. The Top Cut, and again, I shouldn't be doing all this plugging, but, I suppose they have done it. The Top Cut started doing this a while ago, and they did a little bit of streaming, and then On the Bubble have taken over, and certainly Terry Goodacre, who I do want to, give a shout-out to, because he's in the UK and he's a good chap. He's been doing a lot of streaming in the UK with regionals, I think even a little bit of nationals, etc. But this is the first time that I'm aware of that Pokémon are doing it. I suppose they did a little bit at Worlds last year, but they seem to be very intent on doing a bunch of streaming. They're going to be streaming on the Saturday in the Swiss rounds from 5 PM to 9 PM, and the Sunday Top Cut from 9 AM to 2 PM. That's pretty darn good. And it's pretty good. That's obviously American times, you can work it out yourself. Now, the rest of the news is not particularly exciting. The Japanese magazine Korokoro is going to be having a Landorus promo soon, but the picture released has a big bubble over the actual attacks and all of that, so we can't actually see what it is. We've also seen a Japanese advert which has confirmed that there will be Landorus, Lickitung and Dragonite in the set, but we don't know what they're actually going to do. And Heracross EX has been partially revealed. We know that he's got one attack for a Grass Colourless, which does some level of damage and appears to do 10 less damage for each damage counter on Heracross, but we don't actually know that for a fact. I would love it if it did something like 200 minus 10 for every damage counter on Heracross. That would be awesome, because then you'd be able to do a bit of a tanking deck. And significantly, there is actually one thing we do know about Heracross. It's got 220 HP. And that is incredibly significant. Anyone figured out why yet? Just take a second. Pyroar. If it had 230 HP, Pyroar would not be able to one-hit it without a Silver Bangle. Now, obviously, Silver Bangle would do 240, but it's unlikely. Pyroar players generally aren't playing Silver Bangle. It's being played with Muscle Band so that it can hit the, counters to it. 230 HP, yes, Pyroar can still kill it with Silver Bangle, but people are mostly moving to playing Muscle Band now. With 220, it means Pyroar discarding a fire with a Muscle Band will do 220 and one-hit KO it. And seeing as especially it seems to be tanking, it's just... it upsets me, but what can you do? We'll see the attack for good and see if it's any good. If it's something like 150 minus 10 for every damage counter on it, it's probably not going to be that great. If it's something like 200 where it can be one-hitting EXs for free energy, that could be very, very good. It would, of course, be mitigated by the fact that as soon as you did a bit of damage, it hit for a lot less. But, you could play like a Virizion Heracross deck, and it could be a little bit of fun. I think rather than speculating with a half-translated card, it would probably be better to just wait till it's revealed. Now, I was tempted to delay the podcast for a day this week, because Furious Fist is expected to be spoiled tonight. But we've got enough to talk about with International Nationals, and I didn't want to be rushing to do it at the last minute. So what I'm going to do instead is next week will be our Furious Fist podcast, or Rising Fist actually, because it's a Japanese set, and I'll give you my first impression of the cards, and then as always I'll read everybody else's impressions and have a good think about it, and you'll get my updated impressions with hindsight when the set launches in the UK and America in August. So, one last thing I need to tell you about. My friend Luke, he who came incredibly close to getting top 16 at UK Nationals with Big Basics Garbodor, has launched a new blog. It's called Victory Road. And quite frankly, it's pretty good. I'm not going to lie to you, it's pretty good. Now you can find this bad boy at victory-road.co. I don't know why not .co.uk, but it is just victory-road.co. It is a good blog. Now, I do quite often have people asking me to plug stuff on the podcast, because I do get, overall my things, about 400 listens a week, and I know some people listen with friends, and I've heard about families that listen together, etc., which is a bit weird, but never mind, it's cool. If you're listening with your family, hello everybody. And I do get asked to share stuff on the podcast, and the deal is, if I think it's worth sharing, I'll share it. Last couple of weeks ago, or last week, when I told you about the tournament I was judging up in Blackburn, I thought you should go, so I told you about it. This, again, I think you should read it. I read this on a regular basis, therefore I think it's good enough for you guys. To whet your appetite, Tamal Cameron, a UK player I've mentioned on the podcast a few times, most recently last week talking about his TDK deck, we had some kind of quotes from him coming in. He posted a wonderful bit about the Japanese metagame on here, which obviously it's very hard to get Japanese information about the Japanese metagame. And Luke's got a bit of an informant into Mao, and everybody loves that information. Get over there. More recently, his most recent post is about winning a league challenge with a Charizard deck that played 2 Juniper and no other draw supporters. If that doesn't whet your appetite, I don't know what will. Get yourself over to victory-road.co. There we go. That's my plug-in. Now, International Nationals. I, once again, have been going through, and I've been tallying up all the information, because I don't like to look in isolation, because a lot of nationals, and I mean and like I said last week, and if you are offended, as always, get in touch with me, but I don't mean any disrespect. Some of these nationals are very, very small. Some of them have 40 or 50 people at it, and, they just scrape a top 8, and it's really not representative. But if we take all the nationals as a whole, we can learn something from it. It's just like I said with states. You can't really learn anything by looking at one state in America, but you can by tallying it all together. So, there were 6 new nationals this past weekend, and I want to run you through the results very quickly. In Belgium, the winner was Pt.2 Garbodor. Now, it was Denise Van Wilk, or something along those lines, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, who won that tournament, and that is impressive for 2 reasons. First of all, we had a female nationals winner, and it sucks that I've got to make such a big deal about that, but the fact of the matter is, how often do you actually play girls and see girls at tournaments? Not that often. It's lovely to not only see them playing, but see them doing well, and I know how patronising and ridiculous that sounds. I want to see more girls playing, and I think it should be celebrated when they do well. What is interesting here is that she is the partner of Sami Sakum, he who is incapable of not qualifying for Worlds. Got top 4 at this past year of Nationals, and got second last year at Nationals, has won it many times. Also, is pretty much incapable of not top-cutting Worlds. Only 1 year he's been and not top-cut Worlds. Needs to win it. So, she has had the best deck list, the best training, blah, 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 but that takes nothing away from her accomplishment. She won Belgium Nationals, and that was awesome. The top cut in Belgium consisted of 3 Pt.2 Garbodor, 3 Virizion Genesect, 1 Garchomp, with Druddigan of course, and one Aromatist. Now, what's interesting about Druddigan, of course, is when you play it with Altaria, and I don't know if this deck played Altaria, you can be revenging for 170 without Muscle Band, which, of course, is enough to kill an EX. Very interesting. There's not really much more to say about Garchomp. I've talked about it a million times in this podcast, including a big bit last year when friend of the podcast, Balk, went, or however you pronounce it, sorry sir, went and got top 32 at the ECC with Garchomp. So there's not really much more to say about that deck. Druddigan's good. I assume it was played with Altaria. Go whoever got top 8 in Belgium with that. In the Czech Republic, it was won by Pyroar, Landorus, Mewtwo. Now this is somewhat similar to the Pyroar deck I've been playing online. I might actually try and construct a version of this deck to play and show you some stuff on it. But essentially, it's played with Landorus and Mewtwo. You've got big, hard-hitting EXs, and you've got Pyroar. So I assume, and again, I am making assumptions with these decks, so I apologise if I get anything wrong here. Because unless I see the deck list, I can't really comment. But with this, what you've basically got is Pyroar to wall against things like Plasma. And of course, all you would need to do here is just make sure that if you're playing someone against Plasma, you end up with 3 Pyroar and nothing else out. You've also got your Landorus and your Mewtwo, which are just good, hard-hitting, energy-efficient attackers. If they bring out their Pyroar counter, you've got Mewtwo and Landorus. One Latias is not going to do much against a Mewtwo or a fully functioning, Landorus with free energy, etc. So, quite frankly, this sounds pretty cool. I would be interested to see how they balance the need for fighting and fire energy, because Pyroar needs fire and Landorus needs fighting, and if you use something like Rainbow Energy, because Prism wouldn't work with Landorus, if you use something like Rainbow Energy, I worry that, and also the blend, they aren't on the same blend, so it would have to be Rainbow, I would worry about your susceptibility to Enhanced Hammer, which is seeing a bit of an upturn in play at the moment. There was also, that's what won. Interestingly, 2 of those decks made the top 8, along with 4 Yveltal, 1 Plasma, and 1 Virizion Genesect. Over in Indonesia, there was only a top 4. It was won by Plasma, and the top 4 consisted of 2 Yveltal, 1 Plasma, 1 Big Basics. Over in Norway, it was won by Yveltal, piloted by Tord Reklev. He's a chap that knocked me out of the top 8 at the ECC, and seems to, I think in the last 3 years now, he's come first or second at Norwegian Nats. He is a powerhouse of Norwegian Pokémon, and I don't think you can say that about many people. Although Stian Nilsson, who I think he beat in the final, probably comes fairly close. And also made the top 4 of the ECC, as it happens. In fact, made the final of the ECC. So, yeah, good player, playing the best deck, and this is what you will find at things like Nationals. Tord Reklev is probably the best player in Norway at the moment. He was playing the top deck. It's hardly a huge, surprise that he went and won Nationals under those circumstances. In Norway, we had 3 Yveltal, 2 Plasma, 1 Blastoise, only the second Blastoise to top 8, 1 Empoleon Miltank, which is staying around, and 1 Weavile with Lopunny. Now, Weavile, I told you about my friend Tommy Roberts, who made top 32 at the ECC with that, and I know I mention the ECC a lot, but it is the only tournament in Europe that's significantly over about 100, 150 players, the only one where we have a top 32, so it does give us the most interesting stuff. I suppose it did well, which makes me want to talk about it, sorry. Feel free to insult me by email at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk or tweet me abuse at the Wassy, but please try and be nice. And I've spoken to Tommy about Weavile a lot, and he's basically told me that had he gone to Nationals, he unfortunately had a clash which meant he couldn't go, he would have played Weavile. Now, Lopunny came out in Flashfire, and I have seen the deck list for this one, so I can talk a bit more about this deck. It is utterly, utterly genius. Lopunny's got an ability which allows you to return it to your hand. Doesn't have to be active, just return Lopunny to your hand. So, Weavile, for those of you that don't know, I think it does 30 damage times the number of Pokemon you discard from your hand. So you play it with Execute, and every turn you get 4 Executes in your hand, and you do 120 damage. You put something like a Muscle Band on there, or a Silver Bangle, and that 120 goes up to 150 or 140, meaning that the vast majority of the time, you need to discard 1 more Pokemon, assuming you've got all 4 Execute in your discard, and of course 1 might be prized, But assuming you've got all 4 execute in your discard, then all you need to do is get those 4 back in your hand using their ability, and you need 1 more Pokemon to KO any EX. It is insanely good against Virizion and Genesect, because you're generally, if you get it set up, you're KOing the Virizion before they're even attacking. And if you kill it before they Emerald Slash, when they've only Emerald Slashed once, you're going to win that game. Can struggle against some faster decks. It depends on how fast you set up and how well they go with non-EX attackers. The way Lopunny works with this, of course, is that you put it on your bench, and then anytime you like, you can call 2 Pokemon into your hand, as long as there's 4 execute in your discard. If you've got 4 execute in your discard and a Lopunny on your bench, you can get 6 Pokemon in your hand without, when you get end to 1, you need nothing. Assuming you've got a Weavile with energy, you need nothing to go and do 180 damage, which is absolutely ludicrous. Genius idea, and I must admit, when I looked through Flashfire, I missed Lopunny entirely, and I missed its synergy with Weavile, which is not usually the kind of thing I miss, and quite frankly, I love missing stuff like this, because I find out somebody, and before I'd even seen the list, I see that somebody's cut with Weavile Lopunny. So I go and have a quick look on, one of these sites. It's Pokegym Research Tower. At Lopunny. And as soon as you see the Lopunny card, it hits you like a ton of bricks. It makes so much sense. Because it's another way to get Pokemon in your hand. You're not going to be ending yourself to 4 hoping to hit 2 Pokemon. You've just got them on the bench. Or you've got a Bunnelby down and you just need to hit a Lopunny or a Ball or some other way of searching out a Lopunny. It's utterly, utterly genius, and I love it. So, that was Norway. In Poland, it was won by Plasma, and there were 5 Yveltal, 1 Plasma, 1 Virgin, and 1 Miltank in Polion. And in Singapore, it was won by Charizard Pyroar, and we had 3 Yveltal, 1 Plasma, 2 Virizion Genesect, 1 Charizard Pyroar, and 1 Flygon Dusknoir. So, what I'm going to do, just like I did last week, I'm going to run you through my totals, because I've obviously totaled all this stuff up, and then I'm going to run you through my notes. And I'm not going to repeat anything from last week. If you want to know my notes from the first 6 Nationals, go back and listen to last week's podcast. I'm only interested in the new notes, the new stuff we can learn from this week's Nationals. So the total winners. In first place, we have Yveltal Dex with 6 wins. That shouldn't be surprising. In second place, we have Plasma with 3 wins. It's jumped from 1 to 3. In third place, we have Pyroar with 2 wins. And in fourth place, we have Virizion Genesect with a single win. They are the only decks that have won. 6 Yveltal, 3 Plasma, 2 Pyroar, and a Virgin. Total top cuts. Deep breath. I'm going to run through these in the order from first to last of how many top cuts they've had. Number 1, by a long way, Yveltal with 41 top cuts. Number 2, Virgin with 15 top cuts. Number 3, Plasma with 11 top cuts. And then we've got Aromatisse and Miltank with 5 each. Pyroar with 3. Trevenant and Blastoise with 2. And then we've had 1 top 8 each for Palkia, Raybor, Aggron Sableye, Flareon, Garchomp, Big Basics, Weavile, and Flygon Dusknoir. Now, as I've always said with states and with these nationals, if you're only seeing a couple of top cuts, especially if they're all in one place, so for instance, last week I told you about all the Miltanks cutting in France and all the Trevenants cutting in Italy, that doesn't show us any kind of pattern we can use. So any of the ones that have got 1 win, I love that somebody top cut nationals with Flygon Dusknoir and with Weavile Lopunny and with Aggron Sableye and with Flareon and with Garchomp. But I don't think those results can be relied upon really at all, because it's one person in one metagame. Maybe they got favourable matchups. Maybe they played against people that kept drawing dead. Maybe that one person has got a really good list and played it really well, but it's not something the rest of you can rely on. That person may well go on to Worlds and do well with it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a good deck per se. It means that that particular person is very good with that particular deck. So, what can we see? Now, first of all, what's very, very interesting is Plasma. Now, I told you last week about how I think Plasma is being overlooked and I think Plasma is great. Now, you might think this is a little bit strange. Especially given I have just told you that Pyroar won 2 of the 6 Nationals this past week. But you know what? So did Plasma. And Plasma is a deck where we have good lists, and it is consistent, and it is good in best of 3. When you think about Pyroar, it's not that consistent, I assure you. And it's really not very good in best of 3, and it's so new we don't have good lists. If you think about Pyroar, one of the things about Pyroar is I want to block my opponent, and there's going to be plenty of turns where I leave a Pyroar active, and maybe I beach if I'm playing beach, or maybe I just pass, or or I'm not attacking. That does not lend itself to best of 3. And at US Nats, you're probably looking at 9 rounds followed by 5 rounds. That's a guess. Might be 8 followed by 5. I think it's going to be 9 followed by 5. What that basically means is you're going to have 14 rounds of best of 3, 50 minutes before you hit top cut. Do you want to do that with a long, stressful deck that keeps taking them to time? I wouldn't want to. Now, there's a couple other things. It's gone into second for wins, but it cut all 6 Nationals. Now, I told you last week that the only deck to cut all of the Nationals was Evil Town. And we had Virgin cutting 5 out of 6. This week, however, we've seen Plasma cutting all 6, and Evil Town cutting all 6, and they're the only ones that did. Now, if we look at the number of tournaments cut, now this is another thing I like to look at, because this basically shows not only is a deck doing well in terms of pure top cut numbers, but is a deck doing well in terms of is it doing well everywhere? Is it just being favoured for metagames? And if we look at this, it gets very interesting. Now, there are 3 decks that have cut a significant number of the 12 Nationals, and they shouldn't be surprising, they're the 3 best decks. First, Evil Town cut all 12. In second place is Plasma, which cut 10 out of the 12. It only got 4 last week, but it cut 6 this week. And in third place, Virizion Genesect, it cut 4 out of 6 this week, bringing its total to 9 out of 12. Now, what that tells us, empirically, and you cannot argue with this, because I'm going by the combined results of 12 national championships. And looking at those results purely in the numbers, indisputably, the top deck is Evil Town decks. Now, some of them are played with Raichu, some of them are played with Bouffalon, some of them are played with Darkrai, some of them are played with Garbodor, some of them are played with Absol, and there's all kinds of combinations. But at their heart, they are all Evil Town decks. And I don't want to cut it down any further. In the same way that some Plasma decks focus on Lugia, some focus on Kyurem, some have just Kyurem, some just have Lugia, some have both, etc. But at the heart of it, you've got Thundurus, you've got Deoxys, and you've got heavy-hitting, consistent, own engine, blah blah blah. So, in first place we have Evil Town decks. Now, second place, last week, it was clearly Virizion Genesect. This week it's not so clear. I'm tempted to put Plasma into second place. But then again, I said it was my pick last week, so maybe that's not surprising. But here's the case for Plasma. It cut 10 of the 12 Nationals, Virizion Genesect only cut 9. It won 3 tournaments, Virizion Genesect only cut 1. And it did better in the second week, more top cuts, more wins, cutting at more tournaments. In all categories, it outperformed Virizion Genesect in week 2. And that's, of course, more reliable because week 1, everyone's still a bit in the dark. Week 2, people are able to react to the week 1 results. So I would put more into what happened in week 2 than what happened in week 1. The only real case for Virizion Genesect is it's had more top cuts. But it's had significantly more. 15 compared to 11. That's about a 35% increase, which is not insignificant. So, there's your case. Regardless, looking at the results of Nationals, they are the only viable decks, which have been shown by these Nationals. Now, some people are trumpeting Rayball. 1 top cut in 12 National Championships does not make me want to play Rayball. Some people are going for Aromatisse, but 5 top cuts in 12 National Championships doesn't want to make me play Aromatisse. The only things I want to play here are TDK, Evitao, and Virizion Genesect. or maybe Lugia. Now this also presents a very interesting conundrum. Now when I was preparing for my Nationals, I got rid of Flareon. And I got rid of it basically because it still had no Raybor matchup, it didn't have a very good Aromatisse matchup, and I couldn't put too much into just trying to beat Plasma and Darkrai. Now if I was going to Nationals, I'd be tempted to make a Flareon list that just beat TDK, i.e. lots of Drifblim, Yveltal Darkrai, i.e. lots of Raichu, and maybe a Landorus or a Terrakion or something, and Flareon. And Virizion Genesect by playing Flareon. Now you got to miss a few matchups. Maybe I'll stick a 1-1 Garbodor line as a Hail Mary against anything else. But the point I'm making is, now that there's 3 good decks, which are proving to be above the rest of the format, they will be the most played decks at US Nationals. Plasma still is underrepresented, but it should be making a comeback. And I think people will properly drop off of Blastoise, Raybor and Aromatisse as they realise it's just not winning. So maybe a counter deck that beats those 3. We're moving into what I would consider at least to be a very narrow format. And the narrower the format, the easier it is to build a counter deck. Again, I'm sorry for mentioning the ECC, but talking about counter decks, we all know I played Flareon at the ECC. I mentioned it 47 billion times a podcast. And the reason was, everyone was playing Darkrai Garbodor, or Plasma, or Virizion Genesect, or Blastoise. So 4 identifiable decks, and it's a risky play, but you build a counter deck to those 4 decks. If you can avoid the rest, you might do alright. I think a play is potentially here for doing that in Nationals. Having said that, I think TDK can do all of those things, so maybe TDK is the way to go. Now a couple other things to point out. There was no Trevenant or Raybor cutting any of the 6 Nationals this past weekend. I think that is significant. There was only 1 Blastoise, and that leads to only 2 in total over all 12 of them. Now Pyroar only cut 3 times, but it won 2 of the 3. Now this could be for several reasons. It could be that the people who played them were just that damn good. Or it could be that it's exceptionally good in Top Cut. Because once you've gotten away from all the kind of littler decks, you're playing against Yveltal Garbodor and Virizion Genesect and Plasma, where it's got really good matchups. I don't know, but I thought it was significant that there's only 1 Pyroar deck that didn't win their Nationals that cut, and that was in the same country as one that did win, so it couldn't have also won. We can't have 2 winners at one tournament. And I have cut Aromatisse as my 4th deck because it only cut 1 in the past 6 Nationals. I don't think it's keeping pace. I dropped it from my list. I have gone to just a top 3 now. Whether you like it or not, that's what I've gone and done. And that's pretty much what we can learn. I could keep talking for another 5-10 minutes, but really I've told you everything you need to know about Nationals this week. There are 3 top decks. I've told you about all the top cuts. I've told you about the more unusual decks and how I think they work. And I've told you about, what the evidence and the data and the numbers show us about the good decks. And I don't think you can avoid looking at that because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. Unless you've got a nice rogue, in which case, hell, go ahead. Rogues do well fairly often in the right hands. Somebody's going to do well with a rogue at US Nationals. Why not you? Unless you're not American and you're listening. In which case, not you, because you're not eligible to play, because you're not resident of the US. Sorry about that. So, that's it, pretty much. Next week, I am very excited about the Furious Fist reveal. I've always had a fondness for fighting Pokemon in the card game, and to be honest, this past Nationals, where I played straight Virizion Genesect, is about the first time I've not played a fighting Pokemon. That's not actually true. I went to Blastoise for a little tournament and I played Plasma in one little tournament. But 90-95% of the tournament since I played Donphan, I've been taking fighting decks to tournaments. So a whole set based around supporting fighting Pokemon is it's just so much fun for me. I am refreshing Poke Beach every hour it seems to see if the sets are leaked. It is coming out in Japan I believe this week, so by next week I should have all the cards and I'll be going through in great detail. Obviously, if there's more international nationals going on this week, then, I'll have to go for that as well. You'll have to have a longer podcast. I'm sure you fine people will cope. In the time being, if you haven't had enough of my lovely British voice, don't be alarmed. Go on to PTCG Radio on YouTube. Watch my Pyro Charizard deck going up against Plasma. And hopefully there'll be a couple more going up in the next week as well. Check my Twitter feed every time a video goes up on YouTube. Obviously, if you subscribe on YouTube, wink wink, you'll hear about it on YouTube. But I will post it up on Twitter as well. So look out for that, and look out for my podcast next week. As always, if you disagree with anything, if you want to tell me anything, or share some ideas, or ask any questions, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or tweet me at the Wassy, and I will get straight back to you. Unless you're listening on SoundCloud or YouTube, in which case just stick a comment down. Everywhere this is hosted, I do check at least semi-regularly, so I will get your comments sooner or later. I look very much forward to talking with you about fists next week. Until then, have a lovely week. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.